Good morning and welcome back to Sun Up on 7. Just before the break, Renata and I had our very interesting but short but sweet couch talk. And now we are joined here by Miss Nicole Solano, who is the CEO of Ministry of Tourism and Diaspora Relations, and Dr. Julio Sabido, who is the CEO of Health. So, interesting topic. We know our borders just reopened, so we're going to be finding out what exactly does this mean, health measures, and how we can, or what we can expect when traveling. So good morning to both of you this morning. Welcome on the couch, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
How are you doing this morning, Ms. Solano?
Good. Thank you so much for having us on the show.
No problem at all. Dr. Sabido, can you hear us?
I can hear you loud and clear, Renata.
Great,
Perfect.
great.
How are you this morning?
Sleepy?
I mean, this is the time when our brain's supposed to function really good because it's early and everything. So, but we're thankful that you can make it.
Start 6:45 in the morning.
Oh, wow. So, okay, borders are open again.
They're open.
Huge deal at this point. So now we have the health concerns. So I want to direct this one to Dr. Sabido first. Can we or should we be expecting a spike in COVID due to the borders reopening?
You're asking me to speculate. I don't know. If it will depend a lot on the personal responsibility of people.
Yeah.
I said yesterday on Open Your Eyes that whenever the Belizeans go over to Guatemala or to Mexico or Guatemala, they should continue to wear their mask. They should continue to practice social distancing. My understanding is that in these two countries, and especially Mexico, they're not enforcing the use of the mask. And sometimes when you're in these places, you would want to tend to take your mask off and feel free because no one else is doing it. So I think it's going to depend a lot on the Belizeans there or who travel there and continue to practice their public health and social measures.
Most definitely.
Right.
Ms. Solano, I want to look at, tourism. And right now, we know with the borders closed, we're kind of forced to be our own domestic tourists, stay local, do all these things here. You have to shop. If you don't have it here, just not do it, right? And so, can you tell me on the tourism aspect, do you think that we're going to start to lose more Belizeans going over to Mexico or Guatemala side now because of the borders reopening? Is this something that's troubling? And what maybe is something that will allow us to keep tourism still here in Belize and make us want to stay in our country and buy from our country?
Well, like you said, over the pandemic, while the borders were closed, Belizeans were traveling around Belize. I don't think that will stop. I think that will continue. But Belizeans also want to leave Belize and explore other countries. So this is the opportunity for them to decide, well, what kind of vacation would I like to have? And I know that a lot of the private sector within the tourism industry is doing everything that they can to keep the tourists in Belize. So when the season, starts to taper off, they offer special rates, and Belizeans still, I believe, will choose to travel within Belize. You'll have those that will want to leave. All of us want to travel, right? That's the nature of tourism. We want to go, others want to come. So that will happen. But I think more and more Belizeans realize that traveling within Belize is, a preferential vacation destination.
That's very interesting there, and especially, well, it opens the door back for competition.
This is
Huge competition, right?
Then prices, though, you have to think about, I know, so now it's going to be, all right, do I have the better price? What am I offering for my competitors? Put on that advantage and make people want to come to me.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to cause our local hoteliers, everyone, to just think outside the box and see how we can maintain and hold that market.
Well, one of the things we were talking about, it's not, right now, traveling across the border is not so easy because you have a lot of conditions to meet to get back in.
Right.
So Belizeans might still decide, well, that's a lot of hassle. Let me just travel to Kikoker, San Pedro, Placencia, Hopkins, wherever it is that they decide to go. There's destinations from the north to the south.
Yeah.
So traveling within Belize right now is actually still easier than crossing the border.
And that's a question that I want to ask as well. So, and I want to direct this one to Dr. Sabido as well. What measures, or could you walk us through the process of actually crossing the border to the north and to the west? Because I understand that there's two different processes happening at the borders. Could you tell us a bit about the health measures there, Dr. Sabido?
To cross the border, all you need to do is, apart from have a valid travel document, is take your either vaccine card or your vaccine app and prove that you are fully vaccinated, that you have 2 doses. My understanding is that immigration checks that for you to exit.
Okay.
And that's the only, from the Belize side, that's the only requirement. Now, coming back in, it will depend on if you're an overnight traveler or if you're a day traveler. And health is going to screen you at the point of entry before you come in contact with anybody else. You're going to get a card, a health travel card or slip that has the date that you exited. And if you are a day traveler, then you just come right back in and you're processed, you're screened, no flu-like symptoms or anything like that, and then you're processed by immigration. Now, if you are an overnight traveler, then you will be required to submit to a rapid test. And again, providing that test is negative, then you can continue on your merry way.
Okay, and is there any difficulties or any checkpoints at the Chetumal side? Because I know that the news report last night said that there are checkpoints at the Guatemalan side that you have to pay $160 Belize in order to get a Guatemalan test.
I wouldn't be able to tell you that. Guatemala is a sovereign country and they can do as they please, and the same thing for me. So we are responsible for Belizeans and tourists coming into Belize.
Okay.
But I heard the same thing, but I can't tell you if it's true.
Totally
Okay.
understand. On that same note, I want to ask in regards to the costing, because I know, like we mentioned, that if you stay overnight, it's a little bit longer than the 6 to 10 mark that you have to stay for the day, that you will then have to be subjected to taking a rapid test, sorry. And so, in that regards, I know the test is $100. Normally, the test is $75. Is there a reason why that price has been pushed to $100? Is that to discourage people, or what was the idea behind that pricing?
Renata, I think for context, this was put out to tender last year. And I think there are 17, at that time there were 17 eligible providers. Only 2 submitted a bid. And this was one of the lowest evaluated bid. And so I don't know if this is to provide services for the PGIE and the border command. I mean, you have other providers in the country offering these rapid tests, but this is the only provider that has been authorized to do that on behalf of the government. I know you might say it's $100, and it sounds like a lot, but remember the provider has. The Ministry of Health subsidizes nothing. So they are responsible for their payroll, for social security, for transportation, for their own personal protective equipment, for their overtime, everything. They set up their own facilities at the border. So all of this is built in. And I just want to make it clear that it has no cost to the government.
Okay, and in terms of that, Dr. Sabido, there has been talk or there has been concern, basically that government has been issuing free tests at certain locations for our citizens. Could it not be that the government can lobby at the borders to issue free tests for our citizens coming in back?
That is unsustainable. Could you imagine, Julio Sabido wanting to go to Chetumal to watch a movie and then spend the night and then come back in and have the government test at the government's, footing the bill? That is unsustainable. I am very, very unsustainable.
I totally understand how it's unsustainable. Yes, sorry. But what I would maybe say in that regards, when you evaluate it, maybe not free, but something a little bit less costly than $100, because then there are the costs that you're going over there, and maybe something $50 or something to a little lower cost, because again, just the idea, the avenue of having somebody charge $100, and people have been saying that this idea of rapid tests has become like a cartel, the way how people are being charged so much just for a test that sometimes it's just how some people think that it's very ridiculous, the amount of cost that they have to be charged to take a rapid test. And so could you comment on that idea that maybe the government could have been able to offer at a lower cost, considering they do receive free tests and can be able to try to help out the population in that way?
All right, you said we do receive what?
Well, you have received some tests.
We buy our tests. The tests that is being used at the sites, government has to buy those tests. It's not free. Donations that were given to us were in maybe about 15,000, if I recall correctly, 13,000. But those were donations. We can't rely on donations. The government has been buying the rapid tests majority of the time, 99% of the time. And if we venture into offering those tests for free, it's not only the cost of the test. The same cost that the private provider incurs, we would incur. Imagine increasing the wage bill now and have to hire people for the border to do fraud. Right. So that's why I said it's unsustainable. You can say $50, but the reality is, I think that the cost of the test is about $35 or $36 per test when we buy it by bulk. Mm-hmm. And so imagine adding just $15, then you have personal protective equipment, you have transporting your officers, you have paying your officers. Again, it's not sustainable.
Okay. And in terms of the costs of everything now, Ms. Solano, we have tourists coming in, we have travel insurance now, we have them having to be subjected to tests. What are tourists, or how can you see this impacting tourism and the amount of travelers coming in, knowing all these costs that they have to endure?
Well, let me just comment on the cost of the test. I know your question was what was the reason for the disparity, but I just wanted to comment that the $100 charge, $100 Belize charge, is a charge that has been since the beginning of COVID. So at the PGIA, that has been the fee all of these months. And at the border, since they've been testing tourists when we open at the end of May, that has been the charge. As Dr. Sabido mentioned, there's reasons why those costs are the way they are. I'm hoping from a tourism standpoint that we can get to a place where there could be a reduction. That is going to be up to the Ministry of Health and whether or not that can happen. And I say that to answer your question about the cost for tourism. Indeed, tourists have to pay, and any traveler right now the world over understands that if they travel during a pandemic, there are a lot of additional travel restrictions and conditions, and testing is one of them. So people know that that is something that they can expect when they go to certain destinations. Okay. Of course, there are other destinations that have zero requirements. You mentioned earlier Mexico, there are certain destinations that don't have the kinds of requirements that we do. But every country has to take that decision as to what is best for them, and Belize has done that. No?
Okay. Is there a plan in place for, because a viewer is asking if they're looking at home testing kits to be something people can be able to, maybe you have somebody that monitors you and can see that you're getting the test correct and you're doing X, Y, and Z, but that idea of having your own home test kit that you can bring with you and do, is that something that maybe is being ventured into for the future?
I know that is something that currently is not acceptable as a form of proof that you are COVID negative when entering Belize. But Dr. Sabido could give more clarity on that.
Yeah, that's correct. It's not acceptable, and we're not allowing any home tests into Belize as yet. And the reason for that is simple. For surveillance purposes, who will they report to? And I'll use myself as an example. If I have a home test, and I decide I have itchy throat, and I'm going to swab with my home test, of course, and it's positive. But I said, but I'll itch throat. So I could put on my mask and I went out there because I don't have no nose, no fever, no anything. Providing the test comes back positive. So who will I report that to? Right? And we have to be real. People will say, well, you know what? I don't have much symptoms, so I can put on my mask and I still go out there. And so for us, it's an issue because we need to know our numbers. We need to know where the positives are, what community, and also how many people in that household, because then that will determine, can everybody stay in that household? How will they isolate if it's a big household? So it's a lot of logistics and a lot of issues when it comes to data and reporting with respect to the home test. But before I forget, I'd like to just clarify one thing. You haven't asked it yet, but before I forget, tourists are required to test. I saw some people who put up the SI, but not the complete SI. They only posted the amendment to the SI. So those were the only regulations that got amended. What was amended was regulations pertaining to Belizeans exiting and entering the country. Tourists, the regulations that, sorry for the redundancy, but regulate tourists, which is I think 42, remains the same. So all tourists must be tested upon entry.
Okay, and in terms of tourism, Ms. Solano, now the borders are reopening. Do you see a lot of Mexican and Guatemalans beginning to venture back into Belize?
Well, that's the hope. We know that there's great potential for tourism out of both of our neighboring countries. And so we are doing what we can to build those markets and try to encourage more tourists from Mexico and Guatemala. But further to that, a lot of the European travelers do multi-destination travel. So what we even saw yesterday, there are more travelers that are staying in Belize that want to go, for example, across the Tikal for the day and return. So if they can do a day visit without having to pay the test, then that encourages them. we've actually heard some tourists that say, you know, if I can't do multi-destination, I won't come to Belize. So we know that this impacts on tourism.
Right.
There are travelers that want to do, very popular would be, you know, Mexico, Belize, Guatemala. So that's very important for us to look at what is preventing our travelers from being able to do the kind of vacation that they want, and those impact our numbers. No?
Okay. All right.
Dr. Sabido, one more thing in regards to testing. As you know, for Guatemala side, they're requiring that Belizeans take the Guatemalan COVID test. Over there, that's $160. Would there be something where it's open to Belizeans taking a test from Mexico side and bringing it in and showing that? Is that something that could be, you know, looked at for future references? Because as you see, Guatemala is buying for that. Is that something that you guys have thought about or thinking about in any way?
Well, we thought about it before, and we discussed it last night. We haven't, maybe for the future, I don't know if it's mid or long term, but the reason why we're not doing it right now is because people were coming across with false test results. And you were getting your test, and but you were getting a result without actually taking the test. And we know that was happening in Mexico and in Guatemala, so that is why that is not accepted at this time.
And that makes so much sense there, because yes, I could imagine people getting creative, Photoshop all different types of things like that. And then you come into the country not even realizing that you may be positive,
Right.
and just entering into our society like that, spreading this. So I think one of the last questions that we have, or probably the last question that we have due to time, is what's exciting about this border reopening? What does it mean for our economy, our trading, our commerce, things like that?
Well, for me, the borders have been closed for almost 2 years, so that's a long time.
Yeah.
And when I say closed, I don't mean completely closed, because it's been open for cargo.
Right.
Tourism opened in the end of May, and Belizeans were allowed to cross on special permission. But right now, with the opening, also from a tourism standpoint, there's more activity. So the more activity you see happening at the border points, the more movement across borders, it's only natural that will mean positive things for the economy, no? And so I'm excited that we're at this point. I think it's been a long time in coming. There are a lot of people that want the borders open. There's some that, you know, are still a little bit hesitant to see that kind of movement. But I think that we're at the point where we're ready, and it's a good decision, and we'll open slowly and progress toward a wider window of opening hours. So we look forward to that.
All right.
And Dr. Sabido, do you have any final comments you want to give to the viewers at home?
Yeah, well, to follow up on what Julio Sabido just said, we are opening slowly, but in a safe manner. It's easier to open baby steps than to open the floodgates and then try to close it back. It's going to be much more difficult. So we are opening the borders in a safe and responsible manner. But my recommendations to anybody that travels, continue to wear your face mask, not because you go over there, whichever one of the two countries, they don't have it, they're not wearing theirs, and it's a free for all. You're going to indulge in the same behavior, because you are going to come back home. You have families, you have loved ones that you can't potentially infect. And so my recommendation is continue to practice your public health and social measure, irrespective of what the others are doing.
Ms. Solano?
I just wanted to add to what Dr. Sabido said just now. Also, in the coming days and weeks, you might notice changes, right? Because there's an evaluation process that's happening.
Okay.
I know the media did a lot of really good stories yesterday out at the northern border, and I know today some are going west. So you can see that things are flowing well, but there's still little things that need to be adjusted. And as these things are raised and brought up, we will have to make adjustments. So if you see a change in the SI, over the coming weeks, I think the public should expect that we will continue to communicate those changes, and people will eventually learn the smooth flow of traffic across both border points. So.
Most definitely, because I feel like this is like a trial and error thing, seeing it's not been open for so long, so we have to see what's the surplus, what's happening, and also check what's happening on the statistics side of, are we getting more cases, are we getting more positives coming in, because all of those things I think would be what we're going to be analyzing to see what do we need to tighten and so forth.
Having said that, it went really well yesterday though. The feedback was excellent about how things happened and how things moved yesterday, and I think that will only improve over time. So.
That's very promising. I wish all the best for this
I know.
border.
For all our viewers at home that are planning to go either to Guatemala or to Mexico, please make sure, like both Ms. Solano and Dr. Sabido have said, that you adhere to the protocols, that just because you're in a different country, don't mean you're supposed to wear a mask and hug somebody. If you don't see your cousin for a long time, ear hugger if you have to, but do not by any means forget that there is still a pandemic on the rise at this present moment, and you will have to be coming back to your loved ones, and you don't want to put anyone in harm's way. So I just want to thank you so much, Ms. Solano, for being here, and thank you so much, Dr. Sabido, for sharing this conversation with us. And with that, we go to our next commercial break. When we're back, we're going to be talking about communal land rights with Honorable Dolores Valderramas Garcia. Stay tuned for